My name is Liam Smith, and welcome back to the channel. Continuing from where I left off in my last video about World War II fighter aircraft, I'm going to talk about 5 more iconic warbirds from the Second World War. Welcome to World War Military History. Whilst the Supermarine Spitfire was the most iconic RAF fighter aircraft of World War II, the Hawker Hurricane was the most numerous. In the Battle of Britain, there were 32 squadrons of Hurricanes, in contrast to the Spitfire, which consisted of only 19 squadrons. Designed by Sir Sidney Camet Hawker, it was the first RAF aircraft to reach over 300 miles per hour. The aircraft was originally armed with 8 303 Browning machine guns, with later versions incorporated with 20mm Hispano cannons. In the Battle of Britain, the Hawker Hurricane shot down over 2,739 German aircraft and could endure a significant amount of punishment from enemy fire, because the fuselage of the aircraft, unlike the Spitfire's metal frame, was constructed with a steel and wooden frame and then covered with Irish linen. If a Bf-109 20mm exploding mine shell hit the fuselage, many of the rounds would pass through without exploding. Both the Hurricane and Spitfire were powered by the excellent V12 Rolls-Royce Merlin engine. As I mentioned in my last World War II fighter aircraft video, the early Spitfire model couldn't perform a negative G maneuver, and the same could be said for the Hurricane. Fuel would flood the throttle valve, and the float in the carburetor would be forced downwards, causing the engine to sputter. This flaw was eventually solved by a British engineer named Beatrice Schilling. She placed a small brass ring inside the engine to restrict fuel flow to the minimum amount necessary. This small addition allowed RAF pilots to perform quick negative G maneuvers without the loss of engine power. Throughout the course of the war, the Hurricane was developed into several versions, including the roles of bomber interceptor, fighter bomber, and ground attack. Over 14,500 of these aircraft were built during the war. When the German FOCKE WULF 190 first flew over the English Channel in 1941, the aircraft came as a nasty shock for the RAF, and it completely outclassed the Spitfire Mark V in all but turn radius. Designed by German engineer Kurt Tank, the FOCKE WULF 190 was powered by the air-cooled BMW 801 radial engine, which produced 1,540 horsepower. It was armed with 4 7.92mm MG-17 machine guns, 2 in the coal and 2 in the wing root. In the outboard wing were 2 20mm MG-FFM cannons. When it was first pressed into service in 1941, the FOCKE-WULF 190 wrestled control from the RAF and would come to be known by the nickname the Butcher Bird. Later in the war, as the situation in Germany was becoming increasingly desperate, the FOCKE-WULF would be utilised as a high-altitude interceptor. The air-cooled BMW 801 radial engine was eventually phased out in favour of a more powerful liquid-cooled engine, the UMO 213. This increased the power output to 1,776 horsepower. Tunetank would take this aircraft one step further with the introduction of the FOCKE-WULF TA-152. Only 69 of these planes were built. In total, a staggering 20,000 FOCKE-WULF 190s were constructed throughout the course of the war. Few fighters of the Second World War could match the raw firepower of the American P-51 Mustang. Originally implemented with the Allison V1710 engine, the Mustang had great performance at low to medium altitude. However, this fell off sharply at a higher service ceiling. In August of 1942, the RAF began a program to test the Mustang with the excellent Rolls-Royce Merlin engine. This change drastically increased the performance of the aircraft to 441 miles per hour at 29,800 feet. The Mustang would eventually enter combat in Europe in December of 1943 and in the Pacific Theatre in late 1944, where it provided escort to the B-29 Superfortress. When the American daylight bombing campaigns increased against Germany in 1944, the United States Army Air Force desperately needed an escort fighter to support the B-17 Flying Fortress. The Mustang provided the solution to the problem, as the fighter could provide ideal protection during the bomber missions. The most famous variant of the Mustang, introduced in May 1944, was the P-51D. It consisted of a low-back fuselage and a special bubble canopy made of clear plastic, providing the pilot with all-round visibility. It was armed with 650 caliber heavy machine guns, 2 times 1,000-pound bombs, and 6 times 127mm rockets. Under the wings were 2 disposable drop tanks, giving the aircraft a total range of 2,000 miles. During these escort missions, which lasted for over 6 hours, the Mustang pilots would drain these external fuel tanks first, before switching to the main internal fuel tank. More than 15,000 Mustangs were constructed throughout the Second World War. The aircraft was also deployed during the Korean War, before eventually being replaced by the F-86 Sabre. Another excellent fighter aircraft was the F-6F HELLCAT, first entering combat service in the Marcus Island raid on the 31st of August 1943. The HELLCAT was built to counter the threat of the Japanese Mitsubishi A6M0 and to substitute the aging F-4F Wildcat. Whilst the HELLCAT possessed some similarities to the Wildcat, there were noticeable differences. The HELLCAT was powered by a more powerful engine, the 2,000 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp radial engine, the same power plant that supplied the Thunderbolt and Corsair. There were improved features such as a larger propeller and wider landing gear for carrier-based operations. The HELLCAT was heavily armed with 650 caliber M2 AN Browning machine guns and a variety of other weapons such as bombs, high-velocity rockets, and torpedoes. By 1944, the HELLCAT was to become the American Navy's standard carrier-based fighter. It first saw action against the Japanese on the 1st of September 1943, when fighters of the USS Independence intercepted and shot down a Kawanishi H-8K MLE flying boat.
A 20-ton, four-motored Kawanishi seaplane, the kind we call Emily's. Miss Emily's a tough old girl. Right now she's screaming for help and telling Tokyo by radio where we are. HELLCATs are closing in on it. So long, Emily.
It outperformed the Japanese Mitsubishi A6M0, with pilots gaining a staggering kill ratio of 19-1. In a period of just 2 years, the HELLCAT would shoot down a total of 5,156 enemy aircraft, which accredited to over 75% of the Navy's aerial victories throughout the course of the war. A total of 12,275 HELLCATs were produced from 1942 to 1945. This video would not be complete without discussing the world's first operational jet fighter, the legendary Messerschmitt Me-262. Nicknamed the Schwalbe or Sturmvogel, depending upon the variant, it revolutionized aviation technology and influenced several post-war design jet aircraft, such as the American F-86 Sabre and the Boeing B-47 Stratojet. Development of the Me-262 was underway before the outbreak of the Second World War, but the Luftwaffe encountered several complications with the UMO-2004 axial flow turbojet engines. Rather ironically, the first test flight of this aircraft involved a Junkers UMO-210 piston engine before the conversion to the jet engine. Some of these turbojet engine issues included a shortage of high-quality alloys like nickel and cobalt because of the heat and pressure that was generated. Thus, the Germans were forced to use inferior materials that rapidly degraded, causing the engines to have a short life expectancy of only 10 to 25 operational flight hours. This prevented the aircraft from entering operational service until the middle of 1944. Compared to other fighter aircraft of the time, such as the American P-51 Mustang, the Me-262 was much faster and heavily armed with 4 Mk108 30mm cannons. Some variants were armed with 24 R-4M rockets. The aircraft was utilized in a variety of roles, such as reconnaissance and, to a lesser degree, as a night fighter. However, its primary use was in attacking American bomber formations, and it was absolutely deadly in that role. Luftwaffe pilots claimed a total of 542 Allied aircraft shot down.
What was that? What the hell was that? It went by like we were standing still. Blue leader to group. Get off the air. Going by at 2 o'clock. What the hell is it?
The only way the Allies could counter the aircraft was to attack it on the ground or during takeoff and landing. In the end, the Me-262 had little effect on the war due to the shortage of numbers, limited resources, and its late introduction. In 2019, I visited the Australian War Memorial in Canberra and got a few photographs in front of this awesome-looking machine. This particular Me-262A2, called Black X, was the fighter-bomber version in late 1945 and served with the Luftwaffe bomber unit Kampfgeschwader 51. It was eventually surrendered to the Allies on the 8th of May 1945 and shipped to Australia on the 22nd of December 1946. Thank you so much as always for watching. I really enjoy making these history videos. And as always, don't forget to give us a like and to subscribe for more content. Until then, stay tuned. I'll see you next time.